Welcome back to another episode of On Air. In fact, this one's episode number 9, titled The Trump Card, Revolution or Business as Usual, with Phoenician Hunter and Tesla 369. Welcome, Phoenician Hunter.
Hello, it's good to be back for another show. We'll get straight into it. I didn't intend to write anything covering American politics, but because American influence reverberates around the world and it affects everyone, I thought it was prudent to cover the election and what it actually means for us and for everyone, really, around the world.
Right, very topical. That's good.
Yeah. But before we begin, we need to establish what the United States of America actually is and what it represents. Because this is where I think people have the wrong idea of America and what it is. So from my perspective, I don't see them as the champion of, love, freedom, and liberty, as many Americans do. Unfortunately, that's not how I view it. And their actions, especially in the last 80 years, since or even prior to World War II, has not proven that they are, in fact, the good guys. Now, this does not extend to American people, okay? Because
Of course.
I have to say now that most of my supporters and backers are American, and I found that they are probably the most generous people that I've interacted with. So when I say you are the baddies, I'm not referring to the American people. The American people have just been sucked into this.
Passengers on the ride to
Everyone else,
the government of the day.
yeah. I always encourage people, especially Americans, think twice about joining the military because they sell it as defending America and democracy. That's not what you're doing. You don't defend your country by being on the other side of the globe. That's not how you defend America. No one's attacked America, so you don't need to be going to join the military in order to defend it.
Sure.
Which many ex-military personnel have actually come to that conclusion after serving time, in the military.
Of course.
But by then it's too late. They've already done the damage. So, just think twice about getting involved in anything like that.
I guess let's hear from you in terms of what you think the United States of America stands for and what they are.
Yeah, I have covered what I believe America stands for in a number of my posts. The most recent one being Britain Regains America. And from that article and others, my belief and research shows that America really is the extension of the British Empire, or more accurately, the remnants or the extension of the East India Company.
Sure.
Okay. And that is evident even in its flag, its adoption of the British East India Company flag. And then you got to say, all right, so what was the British East India Company? Well, it was just a corporation, a mercantile corporation. And when you look at America today, I mean, that's predominantly what it is, right? It holds the most wealth in the world, and most of the global, companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, they're all American-based companies, right? That own, how much do they own around the world in terms of stocks and influence in other companies? So, yeah, America to me is just, the British East India Company gone global on steroids.
Sure.
Okay. So who would control that kind of company? It would be merchants. So, we go back to what I predominantly write about, which is this merchant class, this nationless, internationally based financial oligarchy. Okay. I said there's another point that I have to address that, people go on about, no, America really is, belongs to the Vatican and Jesuits and all that. But there is a case for America being the new Rome. I think part of when America was initially rediscovered, let's say, by the Spanish, there was an element there that financed that venture to make America the new Rome. But to me, and I've proven this in articles, is that it quickly moved into the hands of the British soon after Spain had discovered it. And then through the British, then it became the idea or extension of the British Empire. And I mean, merchants have been all over America from its very beginning. Like New York was called New Amsterdam. And anyone who looks into Amsterdam and what Amsterdam was the financial capital of Europe at that time. Okay. And most of the merchants that set up Amsterdam to become that financial capital were merchants from Venice and merchants from Spain and Portugal. A lot of Jewish families who were kicked out of Spain or the Iberian Peninsula, moved to Amsterdam and set up shop there. Okay. So when America was discovered, they saw that as the opportunity to expand. So that's why it was called New Amsterdam. Okay.
Yeah.
And then they got there first, but then the British took it from them and it became New York. Okay.
Sure.
So, we've established what America is. It was always going to be this mercantile empire for the merchants.
In setting that up, where do we go from here in terms of what we see, who controls what's happening?
The way they sell this idea is through the word democracy. Okay. So now we've got to go back to that word and understand the modern version of democracy as we know it and as we practice it is a product of the British financial oligarchy, again, out of the city of London. Okay. This is their creation. Okay. So why democracy? Because it benefits them. And this, again, I cover in another post called Why Fascism, and why it's so important to project this idea of democracy around the world. Okay.
Are you saying, regarding your post, the quote that you mentioned about the British journalist? Do you mind if I read it? Maybe to
No, go ahead.
Okay. It's something along the lines of, Britain is the workshop of the world. It lives by foreign trade. Therefore, to secure and hold markets, it must invest money abroad, acquire colonies, and control the seas. The world must be made safe, not for democracy, for that is only a word, but for trade and commerce. That is the national policy of the British people, of both Liberals and Conservatives. It forms the background of all British thinking. Wow, that's intense. Yeah. Can you maybe talk to that?
When you read that, it equally applies to America and American thinking. Okay. That is what America always projects around the world. Yeah, in short, democracy gives the merchants unlimited access to a nation's resources and markets. That is why it is pushed. Now, there was another quote by Henry Kissinger who said something along similar lines, where America had a mission to bring about democracy, if necessary, by the use of force. And that's what you've seen.
Yeah.
And that's what you've seen applied around the world, by American. People need to remove this idea that democracy means freedom. It doesn't mean freedom, okay?
Well, the definition, as per the ancient Greeks, was meant to be about we the people, right? But based on what you've said, the quote that you've just mentioned for Henry Kissinger, I think the statistic is that America has been involved in a war for every 20 years. So every 20 years, they're involved in some type of war for the past 200 years. That's the stat. It's probably more than that, but in more recent times.
Yeah, and that probably doesn't include proxy wars and bribery and
the list is endless. Yes.
Confessions of the something hitman, or I don't recall it, but he was an American. I think he was part of the CIA or intelligence community.
Yeah,
and he wrote a book exposing how America would go around the world and impose, again, democracy through bribery or assassination. So if like you just mentioned war, but they don't even need to go that far.
That's right.
They could just assassinate someone or bribe someone, prime ministers, presidents, or whatnot.
So evil.
Yeah. So, people need to understand that you don't have freedom. What you have are rights and privileges granted to you by your government. Okay. So now, if you're a free person, you don't require permission. Okay. That's right. Slaves have rights and privileges also. Yeah. Okay. This is what we need to understand, okay? It's just a word that they use. It's a code word.
So what we are seeing now is akin to modern-day slavery, essentially.
It is. And, we need to understand the people who benefit most from the current mercantile American empire, global empire, which has become, since the fall of communism, the sole global superpower, the merchants thrive and hold the power under that system.
Which goes back to your various articles around the City of London, how the
Yeah.
City of London was created, etc., which was our last podcast, for those that want to go back and have a listen. Which brings me to another quote that you've published in your article from Thomas Jefferson. Do you mind if I read this out? Again, just to put a reference point to what we're talking about. Okay, so Thomas Jefferson once said, "But merchants have no country. The mere spot they stand on does not constitute so strong an attachment as that from which they draw their gains." Maybe expand on that if you could.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to the point that it's not the American people. Your country is just a vehicle for these merchants,
Mm-hmm.
It's a tool, and when they extract maximum profit, they'll move elsewhere. This has been done for millennia. Merchants move with the empires. Okay. So once they see a need to move elsewhere for whatever reason, they will. It's not the American people doing this. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you can be contributing to it, like I said, if you join the military and various other things. Okay. So that's why I don't encourage that.
Okay.
I've noticed since Trump's re-election that there's a segment of Americans that view, and I don't know where this originates from, but they view especially Europeans as inferior. And somehow there's a sense they despise Europeans. And there's been a few comments on social media, driving this point where, oh yeah, you're scum. You don't even have air conditioning. Really stupid,
Sure.
childish attacks. And they see themselves as some kind of savior. And if it wasn't for America, Europe would be a backwater. And we saved you. And let me just clarify this for people who are not in the know.
Please.
America did not save Europe. What you did is you destroyed Europe. You destroyed the country of your ancestors. Okay. And then at the time of World War I and World War II, most of American immigrants, most of their ancestry was German, Italian, and Irish. I mean, this was a civil war in one sense.
Mm-hmm.
You got predominantly Germans and Italian Americans fighting Germans and Italians. This is how strong the propaganda was. This is what they made you do. For what? In the belief that you were saving Europe, you were liberating Europe from the evil Nazis and that. No, what you did is you destroyed Europe and you handed half to the Bolshevik Jewish communists, right? Because after World War II, they divided Europe into two, right?
Yes.
So after and half was given to them. And the other half was given to the British Judaic Masonic City of London group. And now, all right, so this afforded you world dominance. America became the global empire after World War II. That was your reward for destroying your heritage, basically, Europe. This mentality needs to stop because you're not the savior of the world. Yeah, you were the baddies. Okay, because look where it's taken us. So everything you see in the world today, everything that Americans complain about was brought about by those actions in World War II. Right. Okay, so now they talk about the demise of culture and the rise of the left.
Yep.
This is allowed only because you destroyed the only thing that was very close to destroying that. And again, if you read my post, Why Fascism, you'll understand what fascism was trying to do. And fascism was trying to stop the international merchant class. They're the only movement I know of, at least in the modern era, that was trying to stop this merchant class, basically said, put a stop to it. I just wanted to say that. And again, I'm not attacking American people, but there is a segment of Americans that view themselves in that way and the rest of Europe as some kind of backwater. And it annoys me, and I just wanted to
and that's okay, but you have to understand that there are some very patriotic people in America that listen to every word that the government of the day has to tell them. And I guess this is, on a mass scale, when we talk about things like, MK Ultra and all that sort of stuff, this is on a mass scale. It's like a brainwashing to some degree. So
yeah, but I mean, especially the American right, what this election represented to them was fighting against this whole woke, anti-white, LGBT nonsense. This radical left. People have had enough and just said, okay, enough. We're going to put a stop to it.
Yep.
Okay, but what you have to understand is that America created that force. Okay, that force of wokeism and LBGT and all that, this comes out of English ideals, English think tanks. And, I've looked into the LGBT movement, especially the modern version of it, because, there was a movement back pre-World War II in the Weimar Republic in Germany. The modern movement comes out of the think tanks of the Tavistock Institute.
Ah, of course, yes.
Right? Chatham House in London.
Chatham House, which they have this is just as an aside, the Chatham House rules are that whatever's discussed at these meetings remains in these meetings. That's actually a rule that's used in business today.
These British think tanks out of London, I consider them as one entity with the American institutions and think tanks. Okay, they're one entity. So what do they do? I mean, this is Britain and America's great cultural export to the rest of the world. They're the ones who spread in the modern era this stuff, right? So, for example, most people are aware that America contributes and gives a lot of aid to most countries around the world. Okay.
Yes.
But this aid comes with conditions. Okay. They're not just given money freely. It's given with conditions. And one of these conditions, for example, recently they gave a lot of foreign aid in terms of money to Pakistan.
Yes.
And as you know, Pakistan is an Islamic country, very traditional Islamic. And one of the conditions for aid was that they had to spread the LGBT movement within their nation. Okay, so this is what they do. This is what they, and we've seen this through schools in New Zealand, Canada, Australia, that young children are being exposed to this doctrine. Okay, because those countries, those Five Eyes countries, to me, are just part of this same entity. This comes from the English-speaking world. Okay, so they export this stuff. So then you have to think, okay, so then why? So American people with the Trump administration are rejecting this now, or Trump becomes the symbol of rejecting this wokeness. But you're the guys who created it in the first place. So you create the problem. And then you also give the solution, which is Trump. He says he's going to do something to stop this mind virus that's been spreading in the last 10 to 15 years.
Hasn't that been their modus operandi for every war that they've created? They create the war and then they offer the solution.
Well, yeah, they do. With this latest elections, the way I saw it is Biden and Kamala represented or seemed to represent the collapse and fall of America,
right,
and its power. The way they went about things, it just seemed to me that they were trying to collapse it from the inside. With some of their policies. I mean, the strong push by the Biden administration and the Democrats in general with mass immigration that can't help the unity and power of any country, let alone America. If you're importing people that despise you, how are they going to contribute to your well-being? They're not. They're not going to help the nation. So that's why I saw the Democrat as trying to collapse this power, this empire. But people have suggested they've been put into power so people can turn to the right or to the Republicans because they were so ridiculously, anti-American, anti-white American, that it would force people to the right, the Republicans.
So let me ask you a question. In the past, we've seen, whether people think that the 2020 election was stolen. Why do you think the Democrats in this instance have taken it so graciously?
Okay, so now you brought up a really interesting point. This election, the results clearly indicate that the last election was stolen because, some people have posted, and I think you mentioned this to me off air, that the last, I think it's like 6 election cycles, there was something like, I don't know if you have those figures in front of you.
I do actually, and I wanted to read it to you.
So go ahead and read those.
Okay, so in 2004, John Kerry received 59 million votes. In 2008, Obama received 69.5 million. In 2012, Obama again received 65.9. In 2016, when it was Hillary Clinton versus Trump, she received 65.9 million. In 2020, with Biden, he apparently received 81.3 million.
Yeah.
And now in 2024, the recent elections, it was said that Harris received 66.4 million. So on average, the Democrats from 2004 till 2024, on average, let's say 65 million. So 2020, like you said, it's been proven that it was a stolen election because 20 million votes came out of nowhere.
Yeah, and then they disappeared this
And then they
election
disappeared.
cycle.
That's right.
So, I mean, okay. So, first of all, I don't believe for a second that presidents, especially in a country as powerful as America, are elected by the people. Okay,
Sure.
they're selected by the financial oligarchy and what benefits them at the time. So, at the time, they didn't want Trump to win for some reason. And I think I know the reason, and that is what my post that I'm writing at the moment
Right.
is going to be about.
Yeah.
And what that is, and I don't want to get into it too much in this podcast, is
Sure.
cycles, economic cycles.
Well, we've discussed this already in a previous podcast.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Time is money.
That's right.
And they work. See, what you got to understand is that these merchants work to celestial clock,
Yes.
right? So, they poo-poo astrology and astronomy for everyone else, but they actually take it quite seriously.
Of course they do.
So what I found, and I'll just touch on it briefly, is that the last 4 years with the Biden administration, it was a downturn in terms of the economic cycle, okay? Starting from this year, 2024, the cycle goes upward and peaks at 2026. So it's a great time to make money. So they obviously wanted Trump in because he might implement some policies, or just his presence, confidence, whatever it is, comes in at this time, helps with the cycle. It expands on it. So when it's an upturn, you want that kind of person in. Okay. When it's a downturn, you want someone, as clueless as Kamala and Biden when it comes to economic policies, bringing immigrants, whatever it may be. That's what that cycle represents. So I believe that he was elected, he was allowed to win for this reason.
To restore order, basically.
But restore order for the merchants, so they can profit to the fullest. Okay. Because if you're going through one of those cycles and then you've got someone who's doing everything against perpetuating that positive outcome, they're not going to be able to profit to the maximum.
Would you call this a revolution?
Okay, so now this is where we touch on the subject matter. So just go back a bit because it connects to what you've just mentioned, revolution. So I was talking about, this whole woke left paradigm that has been thrust on the world in the recent years, and how I believe it, it's connected to the English think tanks, right?
Sure.
What we've got to understand also is that medical research, for instance, is all done in English, and most of the sciences are. So if you are to research and if you don't submit a paper in English, it's disregarded. So I've written about this also in another post. It's called Healthy Business. Okay, so if people want to look into that. So the English also control science and medicine. So this is important. So vaccines, big pharma, all the pharmaceutical medicines is another product of the mind.
Right.
They control that around the world. So now when you're talking about a revolution, let's look into that. Okay, so is it business as usual? Have the merchants won, or are we about to see a revolution? Okay, so now there are a few things that were posted that raised my eyebrows. So one of them was after the election, Elon Musk tweeted on X, the New World Order in Latin, right?
Those words, that the New World Order has arrived, or
in Latin, New World Order, right?
Okay, well, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so okay, so now that was the tweet. That's it, right? And people saying, okay, New World Order is coming. Now, first of all, we're already under the New World Order. So if you need a New World Order, you need to identify the old world order. What was the old world order?
But before you go on to that, my interpretation of New World Order is evil. Is that what he's...
Well, it can be, but let's just identify what it is. So the old world order was the Roman Empire. Now, I have identified the New World Order as the British Empire. and by extension, the United States of America. And that's why that phrase was printed on the $1 bill in
Latin.
Yeah, soon after the Federal Reserve was established by the money men.
Right.
From, again, I covered this in a post, Britain Regains America. So they put out that $1 bill with that phrase on it, saying, the New World Order has been established. So we are
I think it's Novus Ordo Seclorum. That's right. It's Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages.
Exactly.
Right.
So we are under that power at the moment. Okay. So now, is he talking about a new order to replace that order?
Yeah.
Because he can't call it the New World Order and referring to anything else but America, because America is the New World Order established through the Federal Reserve.
Can I ask you a side question while you're on this? Do you trust Elon Musk?
Well, the name L, I mean,
what
does L? L is the high god. Means.
Are you talking about the Egyptian god?
Yeah, I mean, his name alone just tells you that he's there as a character. He's playing a role, obviously. The world is a stage.
Of course.
Okay, so he's got a role to play. So this is why. Okay, so is he talking about a new world order that's going to replace the current one?
Right.
That is, the current one is America. So maybe there is a revolution. Now let's look into that. Okay. So there was another. Okay, this is interesting. Now we need to keep in mind that many astrologers and occultists say that we are currently living in the dark ages, but we are now entering or have entered a new sign, the sign of Aquarius, which is an air sign. And this sign will bring change. Now, no one really knows it. There's debate about, have we entered it yet? We haven't entered it yet. The way I look at things, I lean towards we've already entered it. So if it's an air sign, we were in Pisces, which is a water sign. So if we're entering an air sign, we have to see things that are related to air. Do we see that? Well, aeroplanes is one, airwaves. When we sort of entered the age of electricity, to me, seemed to indicate that we were entering an air sign.
Sure.
Okay, so now one of the things they push is digital currency. So digital currency is not something you can touch with your hands. What is it? It's in cloud. It's in the air.
That's right.
Okay. So maybe we're already there, and the revolution is pushing us towards, getting a foothold more into the air sign. Okay. So then when you were saying, is this good or bad? Okay. Now let's look into that. For me, if we need to change or revolution, is that we need to move away from the current system. What dominates the current system is
material.
The mercantile material. Exactly. The mercantile age, the material age. If we continue then down that path, which is the merchant's path, then we haven't had a revolution. Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So the focus needs to be on spiritual and physical health. Spiritual health and physical health. So we need to change the current systems that are in place. Now, so what I found was that there were reports that Robert Kennedy Jr.
Right? Oh, yeah, I've got a lot to say about him, yeah.
Okay, will be involved with the FDA and the CDC, which are, the most corrupt institutions that control vaccines and medicines. And like I said, this America and the English-speaking world control that for the rest of the world. So if you need to stop it, you need to stop it here. So he is, considered an anti-vaxxer. Okay.
Yep.
So if he's going to be put into that area and we see change there, then there's a revolution happening, because one of the ways they control all the minds of people is through
our food,
and our vaccines and the poisoning of our minds and our bodies. Okay.
Well, can I just add to this? I follow Rob RFK Jr. on TikTok because he's been very vocal, and the sorts of interviews that he's given and the things that he says is that he's, because as you know, he's sued a lot of pharmaceutical companies and won. Nobody knows this because the legacy media would never.
No, I did not know that.
Promote this, but he's come out and he says They're going after agriculture, pesticides, the use of seed oils, the use of processed foods. Because you have to understand his background. He's a recovering heroin addict, and he's been in recovery for the last 40 years, which is why he's going so full on in terms of going against the CDC and the WHO and the FDA, etc. So I honestly, hand on heart, believe that he will make this happen.
Well, see, these are the signs.
Mm,
Okay, so this is why it's titled, is it revolution or business as usual? Time will tell if this is going to manifest, right? And another thing that the administration has indicated, this was tweeted or posted before the election, and they said that if the Republicans win, they will remove fluoride from
yeah,
the water
from the what? That's
supply.
right. That's exactly right.
So these
He's
are
come out
all
and said that. Yeah.
indications
Well, this is
that
great. This is
well, again, these are all implementations from the merchant class, to dumb us down, make us money, just make us into
sure.
consumers,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
destroy the spirit, the health.
Okay,
So,
you mentioned a word there which I'd like you to maybe expand on. Destroy the spirit. Physical growth versus spiritual growth.
it,
For us to break away from that, for it to be a revolution, I think it needs to be a spiritual revolution.
well, I don't really talk about spiritual matters
Mm,
because everyone has their own set of beliefs
sure.
and their version of what God is.
Mm,
But
mm, mm.
to me, in order to have a connection with God, you need to have a healthy mind and a healthy body.
Sure.
Okay. So people who are on drugs and medications, and this includes vaccines and all this, like you said, you were talking about all the food. It almost works in a way to sever that relationship, to
Mm,
break that connection. And again, who would that benefit? Again, the merchants, because they want you consumed in this world
mm,
of materialism. Because when you have that connection with God, you might not be interested in material possessions as much as you would otherwise, you
mm,
see?
mm,
So that is why that kind of world, the merchant cannot survive in those conditions. So that is why they've created the world in the manner in which we live
mm,
at in the current time. There was an interesting post also that Robert Kennedy Jr. posted the other day, and this is
mm,
a quote. He posted a quote by his uncle
mm,
JFK,
mm.
and it goes like this. This was he just posted this after the election. All right,
Okay. Yep. Yep.
this country cannot afford to be materially rich and spiritually poor.
Well, bingo. There you go.
There
That's
you
what I was
go.
trying to get to before. Yeah. That's
I,
that's that's brilliant.
okay. And another indicator was that I have been following this organic farmer out of America. His name is
Mm,
Joel Salatin. He's world famous. He's a very vocal organic farmer. And he posted on his website that
mm, mm,
he's now given a position with the
mm.
USDA.
Right. Okay.
So that is huge. He's against, modern forms of, like chemical farming, like you said, with the
Sure.
pesticides and all that. So again, this is just another indicator is a revolution happening, the revolution about to happen. But
Uh,
again, time will tell, but the
mm,
signs are there. Yeah, the signs are there. And what people need to understand is that the whole medical industry has been created and it's connected with health, right? So
mm,
food
mm.
and it's all one to me. It's all one business idea
Sure.
is to profit from people.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's to make money from your well-being. So they the one they make you sick and then they give you these medicines or
Mm,
leads to operations or
mm. So,
chemo
so, it's,
or
so it's they're keeping people in a perpetual cycle of disease,
yeah,
essentially.
and
Yeah.
it's to profit. It's to make
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
So what I was mentioning earlier about the age of Aquarius, that people mention that it's an age of revolutions and
Mm,
upheaval,
mm.
and if we're really in that age, then is this the time is this the beginning of a revolution? And if we have to have a revolution, like I said, it has to change from the current system. Otherwise, it's not a revolution. Well, what
Sure.
is it?
Yeah.
So we at the end of the day, we have to choose to exist in an economic zone, which is what most Western countries are at the moment. Not so much in Europe, but as you're aware, and listeners, that I grew up in Australia,
Mm.
and in my whole time there was a culture when I growing up, but I haven't seen a culture there for the last 20 years, or
Oh,
haven't felt culture
yeah,
there.
maybe
And
even
many
more.
Americans say the same about America. So
Mm.
are you happy to
The
just
Canadians say the same thing about Canada.
Exactly. Are you happy to exist in an economic zone? Or do you want to be part of something more, a spiritual existence, or
Mm,
living amongst people, with shared culture, shared
mm,
customs, traditions, beliefs, values. That has been in such a short time has been destroyed in the West, the
yeah.
English speaking world. And it's happening in European countries too. Luckily, where I live, I mean, I live in Italy, and we
Mm,
still have strong traditions and culture is still quite strong here, but it's still under attack. Don't be
sure.
mistaken.
Sure.
And immigration just speeds that along. And for me, that's the purpose of immigration, is to speed
Mm.
the decline. And then at the end of the day, there's no unity, and people are just individuals living in the common thing there is just living in an economic zone,
So just
sharing.
existing in economic zone. But can
Yeah.
I maybe after everything that we've discussed, can I maybe bring it back to the title of this podcast was the Trump card. Is it a revolution, or is it a business, or is it business as usual under a different guise? What are your closing thoughts in terms of how influential is this election going to be on a global scale?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because there was something that I missed earlier. And a lot of people in the West, sorry, I will say English speaking countries specifically, and Americans are not aware of this. And that is that Europeans that are in the know wanted Kamala to win
Okay.
because, and I'll explain why,
Mm,
because they view America, as I explained earlier, as the evil empire, the bad guys. And Europe, and by extension most of the world, has been under the thumb or under the boot of American imperial power since World War II. Okay.
sure. Yep.
So, people blame the EU for a lot of things, but the EU answers to America at the end
Mm,
of the day,
yep.
and American power. We're not free. Anyone who's looked into geopolitics or the economic conditions of Europe are aware of this. We're not free. We are ruled by American interests. That's why, man, how many bases does America have in Europe? I mean, you look at Germany and Italy; those countries are still occupied. Okay.
Well, look at Greece. You can even put Greece into that equation. The
Okay.
amount the amount of naval bases that the Americans have there is just phenomenal. Now, for a number of
I,
reasons which we won't go into, but
Yeah, but I mean, that indicates to me, we are here and our military is staying here.
mm,
It's a show of force.
yeah.
Okay, so there's a segment of Europeans that wanted Kamala to win because, like I said, she symbolizes the collapse of America, and the thought process is American collapses, Europe can rise, or
Mm,
can,
mm.
that boot can be released from its throat. It can dictate its own future. So that's one train of thought, and it's one that I subscribe to a certain degree as well. Okay,
Right. Mm,
so but Trump represents a sort of uptake of American power. So okay, no, we need to we need to save America. We need to reinforce it. We need to, show our force. I mean, look at it this way. If there was a conflict, would Biden or Kamala have more success with getting new recruits in the military, or would Trump?
If you're asking me the question, I think Trump, based on his history, would be going quite in the opposite direction and ensuring
No,
that
what
there
I'm
are no wars.
suggesting is,
But if he was to go out and say, we need troops to go overseas, I would suggest that Trump would have probably a more influential.
no, exactly. That was my point. That
Right. Okay.
Trump represents, a gain of strength for
Mm,
for uh,
mm,
for America.
yeah,
So if America is strengthened again, that doesn't bode well for the nations it bullies.
that's right.
So that's why that viewpoint of
But
Europe. Yeah.
nevertheless, I still, and my views on this, I still think, as far as America is concerned, it's two wings on the same of the same bird, whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats. I think there's an agenda that's happening, and I know that we've raised a lot of issues here in terms of what Trump is going to do versus what the Biden administration hasn't done. But I think it's all by design, and the fact that Elon Musk is now in the picture, and Charlie Kirk, and Candace Owens, and all Tulsi Gabbard and Megyn Kelly, all those guys. I'm still not convinced. I'm not
No,
a
neither am I.
yeah
But like I
yeah.
mentioned, the signs that we mentioned earlier about,
Mm,
the health and the medicines, time will tell if they're implemented or not. So at the end of the day, okay, so America is the merchant's empire. If it continues and if it strengthens under Trump, nothing has changed. There's no revolution. Like I said, and like you said earlier, we need another path, a spiritual path. If we go down this track, nothing's going to change. And the world, especially the Western world, if they continue down this path of immigration, we don't have long to go. Because if you looked at the results of the election, the majority of people who voted Trump were white Americans. Male and female. Most African Americans, I think the Hispanic vote was almost 50-50, but most immigrants will vote Democrat. Now, so if they continue down this path of immigration, the Republicans don't stand a chance in future.
Sure.
Right? So, if things are going to change, they have to change now.
Okay, well, look, again, I think we've covered a lot of topics here that I would be interested in our listeners to provide some feedback, whether that's via your Substack channel at substack.com/Phoenician Hunter, or whether that's through the Tesla 369 YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@Tesla3, the numeric SIX9. Because it's interesting what's going to happen between now and the next couple of months. I think there's a lot that's already happening. And I know that from what I read, that Trump has already reached out to Putin, reached out to Netanyahu, when we're talking about wars and so forth. So again, I'm sitting back and just...
Let's wait and see, huh?
It's a let wait and see. So... Again, I look forward to reading your next article, which is going to be along the lines of what we've discussed, but a lot more, obviously, because you put a lot of time and effort and research into discussing these global issues. But thank you once again for the discussion. Again, I hope our listeners have garnered some sort of insight into what potentially could happen. Any closing comments before we finish up?
I've covered most of what I wanted to say. So, looking forward to our next podcast.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Phoenician Hunter, and look forward to speaking to you next time. Stay well.